So El Carrito is fascinating, it's entertaining, it's impactful. Where did this idea come from?
Yeah, so I actually made a documentary, a short documentary film called Judith, Portrait of a Street Vendor several years ago. And Judith, who was the main person in the film, is a street vendor in New York. And I would go out with her, and she and her colleagues would always have a lot of anxiety about their carts getting stolen. And so every time it was like, oh, is the cart still there? Oh, we need to lock up our cart. And I thought, and I'm a big admirer of Italian neorealism. So I thought, like, bicycle thieves, what would happen if that cart was taken away? And it's sort of like a modern retelling of bicycle thieves, I think, in the present day with a very marginalized community. And so that's where it came from. It's also shot in my neighborhood in Queens. So the neighborhoods where I've worked and lived for about 20 years now, in Jackson Heights and Corona, Queens. And so a lot of the inspiration also came from the community itself. And I collaborated with a lot of street vendors and community folks to tell this story. So it comes from a few different places. And then my background is in community organizing. So that's also like a big piece of what I brought to the story. But yeah, so that's basically where it comes from.
Awesome. And what was your original connection to street vendors? Because they're everywhere. Most people just overlook them. Why did you want to focus on that? And with your previous documentary and with this film?
Yeah, so as you say, it's like a lot of us who live in cities, it's very common for us to come into contact with street vendors. Like if you live in a big city in the US, and it's a way that a lot of new immigrants make a living initially and can still be their own business person, in a sense. And I think it represents like the upward mobility of the American dream. I think it's a perfect example of that. I think also, just as I said, my background is in community organizing, and I have a lot of friends who organize within the street vendor community. So with my documentary, I was trying to figure out, okay, I wanted to do a documentary about like low-wage immigrant workers who are women, and my friend was running this street vendor organization. And so I worked with them, and the documentary just came out of that. And then I told the story of how I was thinking about this narrative film, but also my production designer, Karina Kaufman Gutierrez, she actually is not a production designer. This is the first time she did production design. She actually runs a street vendor organization called the Street Vendor Project in New York, and it's a union for street vendors. So they organize, and she actually, I talked to her early on about my vision for the film, and she was like, yeah, let's do this. And she brought in some of the street vendors. A lot of what you see in the film, a lot of the set and production design is materials that street vendors loaned us for the film. And so, I really wanted to go for a realism portrayal. And so that's sort of my connection to it.
It's beautifully told. There's so much that happens in such a short period of time. Well, what made you want to focus on the fact that, people get their cards stolen, they put a lot of money into this, and, sometimes it doesn't always work out the way they think it will?
Yeah, the reason why I wanted to tell the story like this is because to me, and the film is called El Carrito for a reason. It's a character in the film, the cart. And for the main character, Nelly, to her, it represents the American dream. That cart, she thinks, will get her places. It will help her move up. And so I thought, what happens if you take that away, right? What happens if you take that sort of upward mobility of the American dream away? What do you have left? And for me, it was very important to tell this story about community, because I feel like with a lot of immigrant narratives, and what I'm trying to do is move beyond the American dream narrative. It's still important, and that's still a story we can tell. But I often feel that when people see working class immigrants portrayed on screen, that's exactly where their mind goes, is, oh, this is an American dream story. And what I wanted to do is show, actually, there's more to us. There's more to our lives than just that. And part of it is we are able to thrive when we come together, when we support each other. And I think that's a big story in working class immigrant communities that don't get told, that like, because there's no social safety net for us, we often have to come together and provide that for each other, if that makes sense. And so I wanted to tell that story of how these women, you know, despite how untrusting she is and despite how she's so accusatory, that they still embrace her because they see her as one of them. And there's a recognition that we need each other. And so that was the reason why I sort of told the story that the way that I did.
And bringing this to Dances with Films, to the Chinese theater, what does that mean for a project like this?
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, that's like a historic theater. When I was growing up, like I got to go to LA and look at the, you know, the Hollywood Stars Walk of Fame or whatever it's called, and like the Chinese theater. And that's like where the big premieres happen. So it's so special to have our film filmed in my local neighborhood, and then see it projected on the big screen like the Chinese theater. I mean, that's amazing. That's like a dream. And yeah, I mean, it's really nice for everyone who was involved. I think it kind of shows how like we can do it, you know, with very little resources. We can still make beautiful cinema, and tell stories that are actually universal. And so that's what I think that's kind of the significance of that, is that our stories can be on the big screen in a place like that.
Definitely, and congratulations on this amazing short. Kind of wish that it was a little bit longer so we can see more of her story, but
Yeah.
hopefully that's a plan you have for the future.
Sure. Hey, if you want to give me money to make the feature, I'll do it. Yeah, I mean, I'm working on similar stories, and there's definitely a feature length film that I'm working on, with the script. And so, yeah, hopefully one of these days there'll be a longer form of a story like this.
Awesome. Well, congratulations and have a great time at Dances with Films.
Thank you so much.